The night my parents gave my $87,000 inheritance to my cousin Eric, they thought they'd crushed me. What they didn't know was that Grandpa left me something even more powerful than money, and I knew exactly how to use it to crush him instead. It started at a family dinner that should have been safe, ordinary. I was cutting into Mom's pot roast when I made the worst mistake of my life. I asked about my inheritance. "Mom, Dad," I said with a smile, stupidly happy. I wanted to talk about Grandpa's will and the workshop timeline. Instantly, my mother's face froze. Dad's jaw clenched. And Eric, the parasite cousin who'd returned like a prodigal son several months ago, smirked like he already owned me. My stomach dropped. I could sense bad news coming. I sat down quickly. Dad leaned back in his chair. "Actually, honey," he said, his voice thick with tension, "there's been a change of plans." 6 words. They sliced through me like a blade. My heart started hammering. "What kind of change?" "We've been thinking about what's best for everyone," Mom said, her words coming fast like she was ripping off a Band-Aid. "Since Eric's going through such a rough patch with his divorce and job situation, we're going to let him use the workshop for his handyman business while the estate gets sorted out." The air left my lungs. "That's not possible," I whispered. "Grandpa promised me that workshop. We made plans. Adele," Dad snapped, voice like ice. "Eric needs this more than you. You're fine." Fine. Like I didn't matter. Like my dreams meant nothing. Eric leaned forward, grinning like a hyena. "Hey, I'll take care of it for you. Maybe you can help me with the fancy furniture stuff." Help him. In my own grandfather's shop. With my tools. "What about the house?" I asked, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the table. "The savings account?" Mom and Dad exchanged another look, the kind of look that passes between conspirators. "As executors of the estate, we've decided to sell the house and use the proceeds to help Eric get established," Mom said. "The will gives us discretion over how to handle the assets, and we think this is what's best for the family." I looked around the table, my parents staring at me like I was the problem, and I realized something horrifying. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. "All those years I was struggling," I said, voice trembling. "When I skipped meals to afford college, when I worked 3 jobs to survive, you told me not to ask for help. But Eric asks and suddenly sacrifice is noble?" The silence was suffocating. Dad's face twisted with anger. "Don't make this about you. Eric is family too." "No," I said, standing with tears streaming down my face. "Eric's your favorite failure, and I'm just disposable." Eric smirked again, and that was it. The moment my rage crystallized into something sharper than grief. "I hope you enjoy every cent," I hissed, backing toward the door, "because when this comes crashing down, and it will, you won't even see me coming." I slammed the door behind me, my chest heaving. They thought I was done. But what none of them knew, what Eric will never forget, is that Grandpa left me more than money. He left me a secret, and that secret was the key to their destruction. I spent that night crying so hard I made myself sick. Then I spent 3 days calling into work, lying in bed, replaying every family gathering where Eric got praise while I got ignored. Every Christmas where his community college graduation got more celebration than my bachelor's degree. Every vacation planned around his schedule while mine didn't matter. The pattern clicked into place with brutal clarity. My brother Mark had died in a car accident, aged 19, their precious only son. He was great, and I'd loved him just as much as my parents did. But not too long after the tragedy, my cousin Eric showed up, needing a family after his parents' divorce, and suddenly my grief-broken parents had their replacement boy. Every celebration Mark would have gotten, every second chance, every dollar of support, it all went to Eric, while I became the ghost daughter they barely remembered existed. I'd spent years overachieving, desperate for scraps of the attention Eric got for breathing. Honor roll, scholarships, 3 jobs, perfect credit. All of it meaningless because I wasn't the dead son they were trying to resurrect. Well, I was done being invisible. Done accepting scraps. Done pretending their grief gave them the right to destroy my future. Emma, my best friend, finally dragged me out of bed. "Adele, you need to fight this. Get a lawyer. This is insane." But I felt hopeless. Empty. Like a ghost haunting my own life. Then I remembered something. Grandpa's desk had a secret compartment he'd shown me when I was 15. He kept important stuff the lawyers don't need to see in there. I'd never looked, but maybe there was something my parents didn't know about. I drove to Grandpa's house on a gray Saturday morning, my hands shaking as I used my key. The house felt dead, cardboard boxes everywhere, family photos thrown carelessly into piles. Eric's tools were already scattered through Grandpa's pristine workshop. In the bedroom, I felt along the back of the old roll-top desk until I found the hidden latch. The compartment opened to reveal 3 items that would change everything: a newer will, a handwritten letter addressed to me, and a bank statement. My heart stopped when I saw Grandpa's handwriting. Adele, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and your parents are lying to you. They're trying to funnel everything I built into Eric's pockets, but what they don't know is that I outplayed them. I never had the courage to say this face to face. I wanted peace, not another family war. But now I can finally tell you the truth. Your parents never recovered from losing Mark, and Eric became their do-over son. They've spent years rescuing him from his own failures, and in the process they blinded themselves to you. To them, reliability meant invisibility. To me, it meant you were the only one worthy of what I leave behind. But your parents think they can adjust my old will. They believe they can steal your inheritance and call it doing what's best for the family. They don't know I secretly executed a new will, signed, notarized, witnessed, that cuts them out completely. Everything goes directly to you. My attorney holds the sealed copy. Once you show this letter, their power is finished. And there's more. The bank account they don't know about, the one I've been filling in secret for 5 years, is yours alone. Transfer on death outside the estate. They can't touch it. Inside is $87,000 set aside for your furniture business. The workshop, the tools, the legacy, I put them all under your name. But Adele, don't underestimate them. They will lie. They will fight. Eric will claw at you because without this, he has nothing. That's why you must act fast. My attorney is ready and every document is airtight. Take what belongs to you, prove them wrong, and don't let anyone, especially your parents, erase the future you've earned. I read that letter 5 times before it sank in. Grandpa had seen it all. The unfairness, the favoritism, the way my family took me for granted. He'd tried to protect me even from his hospital bed, and Eric was about to steal what legally belonged to me. I sat in that dusty bedroom, holding proof that my grandfather loved me, believed in me, wanted me to have what was rightfully mine. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. The house appraisal showed $180,000. Not the fortune I'd imagined, but in this market, enough to give Eric a solid start while leaving my parents thinking they'd been generous with family money rather than stolen inheritance. I didn't feel despair anymore. I felt rage. Pure, crystallized, laser-focused rage. Here's what I did next. Absolutely nothing. And it was the most deliciously vindictive decision of my life. For 2 months, I watched Eric's handyman business launch with all the fanfare my achievements had never received. They bought him a $30,000 truck, had it professionally painted, helped him create social media accounts, paid for newspaper ads. The family updates became an Eric worship fest. Photos of his projects, screenshots of 5-star reviews, constant updates on his incredible progress. Mom forwarded his posts to everyone she knew. Dad used his business connections to get Eric clients. It made me sick. But I was also watching Eric make every predictable mistake. He underbid jobs because he couldn't calculate material costs. He took on projects way beyond his skill level because he was desperate for quick cash. He bought expensive tools he didn't know how to use instead of investing in basic business infrastructure, and he was systematically destroying everything Grandpa had built. The workshop that had been immaculately organized for 40 years became a disaster zone. Eric used Grandpa's hand-built workbench as a cutting surface for PVC pipe, gouging scars into wood that had been polished smooth by decades of careful use. He stored paint chemicals next to fine woodworking tools, and I watched rust bloom across chisels that were older than I was. Every ruined tool felt like another desecration of Grandpa's memory. 3 months in, Eric landed his first major project, a $15,000 bathroom renovation for one of Dad's golf buddies. I knew Eric had never done plumbing work in his life, had never installed tile, had never done anything more complex than hanging pictures. I also knew exactly how this would end.
Just a second. There's a crazy mistake somewhere in this video. Can you spot it? Look for it after you finish watching. If you find it, congratulations. You're much smarter than AI. Leave a two-word hint when you find it, such as red hair. But don't say what it is. We'll let everyone know if you get it right. Remember to subscribe for more.
The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Eric's panicked voice on the family group chat. Emergency meeting tonight. Something went wrong with the bathroom job. Something went wrong. I almost laughed. I walked into my parents' living room that evening to find Eric pacing like a caged animal, sweat staining his shirt despite the cool weather. Mom looked worried. Dad looked confused. The bathroom renovation hit some complications, Eric announced, his voice cracking with stress. Complications? What a delicate way to describe total catastrophe. What kind of complications? Dad asked. The plumbing was more complex than I expected. When I tried to move some pipes, I accidentally hit a main water line. The leak flooded the bathroom and damaged the finished basement below. The room went silent except for Mom's anniversary clock marking the seconds until Eric's next humiliation. The client's threatening to sue unless I fix everything and pay for the basement restoration. Their insurance won't cover it because I don't have the right licenses. Dad leaned forward. How much are we talking about? Eric's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. $15,000 for the plumbing and bathroom repairs, another $5,000 for the basement. Maybe more if they hire a restoration company. $20,000, more than Eric had ever earned in a single year from any of his failed ventures. I need help, Eric continued, his voice breaking. I've spent all the startup money on tools and truck payments. If I don't fix this, I'll lose my license, my insurance, everything. Mom immediately went into rescue mode. How much do you need right now? And then Eric did something that made my blood sing with vindictive joy. He looked directly at me. Adele, I hate to ask, but is there any way you could help? Even just part of it? I know you're doing well with your accounting job. The entire room turned to look at me, finally remembering I existed because they needed something. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I smiled. A sweet, sympathetic smile that probably looked genuine to everyone except Eric, who was smart enough to sense the predator behind it. I'm so sorry, Eric, I said, my voice dripping with fake regret. I wish I could help, but I don't have that kind of money available. Most of my savings are tied up in retirement accounts that I can't access without huge penalties. It wasn't technically a lie. I did have retirement savings. I just also had $87,000 in Grandpa's secret account that Eric didn't know existed. Eric's face went from pale to red to purple. Adele, this could destroy everything. My whole future, everything your grandpa wanted for me with the workshop. Everything Grandpa wanted for you. The casual theft of my grandfather's memory made me want to claw his eyes out. I understand how difficult this must be, I said, maintaining my sweet tone. And I really wish I could help, but I've learned to be very careful about mixing family relationships with money. It rarely ends well. That's when Eric's desperation cracked into pure rage. Since when do you worry about family relationships? He snarled, sweat beading on his forehead. You've been acting weird and bitter ever since your parents made the decision about the workshop. Like you're punishing all of us for not giving you something you never even asked for directly. Perfect. Let him show everyone his true colors. You're right, I said calmly, still smiling. I never asked for the workshop directly. I made the mistake of assuming that family members would consider my feelings before making major decisions about our grandfather's legacy. Eric shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the hardwood. You know what? Fine. Don't help. I'll figure it out myself like I always do. But don't sit there pretending this is about respecting your grandfather's memory. This is about you being bitter and vindictive that someone else got something you wanted. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sat in the sudden silence, still smiling, while my parents stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Let him fail, I thought. Let this whole family see what their golden boy is really made of. Eric lasted exactly 6 more weeks. The bathroom disaster turned into a legal apocalypse when the client's insurance company determined that Eric's unlicensed plumbing work had voided their coverage entirely. The The $20,000 problem metastasized into a $50,000 lawsuit, with Eric personally liable for damages his cheap business insurance wouldn't touch. I watched his empire crumble in real time, and it was gorgeous. By Christmas, Eric had declared bankruptcy, lost his contractor's license, and slunk back to my parents' guest room like the failure he'd always been. The truck got repossessed on New Year's Eve. I drove by just as they were hooking it up to the tow truck. The workshop sat empty, filled with damaged tools and broken dreams. But I wasn't finished with him yet. Not even close. On a bitter February morning, I drove to Grandpa's house carrying the letter, the real will, and detailed business plans showing exactly what I could accomplish with the workshop and startup capital that had always belonged to me. Eric was in the ruined workshop, sitting in a lawn chair next to a space heater, scrolling through his phone while empty beer bottles accumulated on Grandpa's scarred workbench. The sight of him lounging in my inheritance made my vision red. "Adele," he said without looking up. "Come to gloat?" "Actually," I said, spreading my documents across the workbench and pushing aside his trash, "I came to offer you a job." That got his attention. Eric stared at the business plans, the bank statements, the legal documents. "Where the hell would you get money for something like this? You told us you were broke." I smiled and pulled out Grandpa's letter, placing it right where he couldn't miss it. "Read this, Eric. Read every single word." Watching his face as he read was worth every moment of suffering over the past 6 months. His expressions cycled through confusion, realization, anger, and finally something that might have been shame, though I doubted Eric was capable of genuine shame. "He left you money," Eric said, his voice flat and dead. "All this time, you've been sitting on $87,000. "He left me everything," I corrected. "The workshop, the tools, the business capital, even detailed instructions on how to make it successful. What he didn't leave me was a family that would honor his wishes." Eric's face flushed red. "So you've been watching me fail for months when you could have saved me? When you could have prevented all of this?" I leaned closer, letting him see the satisfaction in my eyes. "I've been watching you make the same stupid mistakes you've made your entire pathetic life, while my family enabled every failure instead of letting you learn real consequences." Eric clenched his fists in fury. "You vindictive—" "Careful," I interrupted, my voice dropping to ice. "You're in my workshop now, speaking to your potential future employer. I suggest you watch your tone." He deflated like a punctured balloon. "Here's my offer," I continued. "I file Grandpa's real will, claim the inheritance that was always legally mine, and start the furniture business he wanted me to build. You work for me, not as a partner, not as an equal, but as an employee learning to do things right for the first time in your miserable life." Eric looked around at the destruction he'd caused, the damaged tools, the scarred workbench, the chaos where there had once been order and purpose. "What if I say no?" he asked weakly. "Then I file the will anyway. Take possession of everything, and you figure out your next failure on your own. Maybe try food service. I hear McDonald's is always hiring." Eric slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him completely. "Why would you help me after everything?" I thought about that question for exactly 3 seconds. "Because destroying you completely would be too easy. This way you get to spend years remembering that everything you have because I allowed it. Every paycheck, every small success, every moment of stability, it all exists because I chose mercy over justice." Eric's face went ashen as the full implications hit him. "When do we start?" he whispered. "We start on Monday, don't be late." I called the family meeting for that Sunday, same dining room where they'd destroyed my life 6 months earlier. But this time, I was bringing the nuclear option. I arrived early and arranged Grandpa's letter, the real will, and bank statements across the table like evidence at a crime scene. When everyone was seated, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I have some things to show you," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Things that are going to change everything you think you know about Grandpa's inheritance." I read the letter aloud, Grandpa's words finally getting their moment of truth. With every sentence, I watched my parents' faces crumble as they realized the magnitude of what they'd stolen from me. The silence when I finished was deafening. "Where did you find this?" Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. in Grandpa's secret desk compartment. You know, the one he showed me when I was 15 because he trusted me with his private things. Mom's face had gone ghost white. You've known about this for months? While Eric was struggling, while we were using our retirement savings to help him? I've known, I confirmed, letting the words sink in like poison. I've watched Eric systematically destroy Grandpa's workshop. I've watched you two risk your financial security to enable his incompetence. I've watched this family continue to reward failure while punishing success. Mom started crying. Not pretty tears, but ugly, body-shaking sobs of someone finally understanding the depth of their cruelty. We were trying to help family, she choked out. You were helping the wrong family member, I said coldly. You chose a serial failure over your own daughter. You gave away my inheritance to someone who destroyed it within 6 months. Dad studied the bank statement with shaking hands. $87,000. He saved all that money for you. Over 5 years, I confirmed. While Eric was pissing away loan after loan, while you were making excuses for his every failure, Grandpa was quietly building my future. The future you gave away without asking what I wanted. Eric, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke. Adele offered me a job, he said quietly. Working in the workshop, learning to do things right, and I'm taking it because it's probably the only chance I'll ever have to earn something instead of having it handed to me. This changes everything, Dad said slowly. No, I corrected. This reveals everything. The unfairness was always there, you just never cared enough to see it. Mom looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What would it take to fix this? To earn back your trust? I considered her question for exactly 2 seconds. It can't be fixed, Mom. You can't unbreak 30 years of being invisible. You can't take back choosing Eric over me again and again. You can't undo giving away my inheritance while I begged you to reconsider. I gathered up the documents and stood to leave. What you can do is live with the consequences. Eric gets to rebuild his life because I'm allowing it. You get to watch me succeed in spite of you, not because of you. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Eric? I turned back. You start work at 7 a.m. Monday. Don't be late. I'd hate to have to fire you on your first day. 6 months later, I was sipping coffee from Grandpa's mug at 7 a.m., watching Eric sprint across the parking lot because he was 30 seconds late. Fear was a beautiful motivator. Sorry, he panted as he clocked in. Traffic was... Save it, I snapped as I handed him his task list. The Henderson dining set needs final sanding, and if you leave swirl marks like last time, you're redoing the whole thing. Eric studied the list, nodding seriously. Gone was the cocky smirk, replaced by the focused concentration of someone who'd finally learned that actions had consequences. It was delicious. Our order book was packed 8 months out. Clients drove from 3 states away for custom pieces that Eric could now actually build without destroying someone's house. The workshop hummed with purpose again, and I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. Adele, Eric said during lunch break, examining a perfectly smooth tabletop. I think I'm finally getting it. The grain pattern, the way Grandpa always said to work with the wood instead of against it. I hid my smile behind my sandwich. He was getting it, not just the technique, but the patience, the pride in doing things right. Don't get cocky, I said roughly. You've got about 5 years of mistakes to unlearn. But privately, I was starting to see glimpses of the craftsman he could become. When he thought I wasn't watching, he'd run his fingers over a joint he'd cut perfectly. The same quiet satisfaction I'd learned from Grandpa. Maybe there was hope for him after all. Boss, Eric said that afternoon. Mrs. Jeffries called about commissioning a china cabinet. Should you what? Take a $15,000 order when you've been doing this for 6 months? I said sarcastically, raising an eyebrow. Tell her I'll call her back. Eric's face reddened. Right. Yes, obviously. Some lessons still needed reinforcing, but when he handed me his timesheet at the end of the week, perfect attendance, detailed notes on every project, even suggestions for tool maintenance, I felt something dangerously close to pride. Not that I'd ever tell him that. Same time Monday, I said, watching him gather his things. And Eric, good work this week. He looked so surprised by the compliment that I almost laughed. Almost. I'd let him work a little harder for the next one. If you loved watching Adele destroy Eric's life and rebuild it under her control, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to stay victims. What do you think? Was Adele too harsh? Or did Eric get exactly what he deserved? Have you ever had family members or friends steal something that belonged to you? Tell us about it in the comments, and don't forget to look for the glitch.